Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new and somewhat surprising addition to the Zelda Universe podcast. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Connor Schultz, and happy to have you along with us once again. Today, we have another roundtable. We started this year with some discussion about the Zelda movie, and we were pretty much certain we were going to be done with special announcement type deals, but instead we have a little bit more. And so joining us for the discussion today, on my metaphorical left, we have Shona.
Hello.
And on my metaphorical right, we have Jeff.
Hey, everybody.
So, we had a Nintendo Direct about a month ago now, I want to say, and I was expecting, as I think a lot of people were calling for, people have been calling for this since the Switch came out, remakes. I was expecting remakes. We did not get remakes. We have not just a brand new Zelda game, but it's coming out in just over 2 months as of this recording, and it's starring Zelda. For the first time in the mainline franchise, The Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom. What happened? Holy cow! This is amazing!
Yeah,
I mean, firstly,
playable Zelda.
I love the Shadow Drop. Maybe I'm just exhausted after the long wait from Tears of the Kingdom's development, but I love that the announcement, and it's 4 months away. Such an easy wait, much easier to digest.
Yeah, same thing. I think I was definitely not anticipating another Zelda game for this year. And certainly after Tears of the Kingdom, which, yeah, as you say, there was such a big build-up and a big campaign for it. It's like, oh, actually, we've been working on something else as well. Here you go.
I feel like Shadow Drops have become a little bit more common over the last couple of years after getting build up and announcements and trailers and teasers for years and years about all kinds of things. Suddenly, we don't have that anymore. And I appreciate that because it gives us something to look forward to immediately. We're not...
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of, over the last few years especially, things like delays and leaks, which have probably upended a lot of, video game companies' plans. And so it's actually easier just, well, let's keep it under wraps and only reveal it when it's ready to go.
I'm thinking it's very concurrent with what also was dropped, Metroid Prime 4, which was one of the, it's like the exact, almost the exact opposite of what we're talking about here, because we got that announcement, 7 years ago or something? And then it went through development hell, basically. Until all of a sudden, oh, wait, by the way, this is coming next year.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting too, not going to lie.
Plenty of opportunity to talk about that if this was a Metroid podcast, but it is not, so we're not going to. Let's talk about our main character. This is something that has been, I wouldn't say necessarily demanded, but it has been requested by fans for a pretty long amount of time. I want to say at least since Wind Waker. This is the Legend of Zelda. Why is Zelda not the main character at least once? And now we have it. What does that mean for those of us who have been with this franchise for forever?
It's very exciting. Yeah, definitely a long time coming. Something, as you say, like I've been around in the Zelda community for way too long, and it is something that has been discussed time and time again. I think especially with Tears of the Kingdom, when that very first trailer was dropped, where they just said a sequel to Breath of the Wild is in development, and we saw Link and Zelda journeying together, everyone thought, oh, maybe now we can play as Zelda and maybe she'll be accompanying us on the quest. Obviously, that definitely did not happen, but at the same time, Nintendo, maybe they did take that, and as they were secretly working on Echoes of Wisdom behind the scenes.
It just feels so deserved because even when Zelda has not been the protagonist or, the playable character of the mainline Legend of Zelda games, she's been such a rich, complex character throughout her many incarnations. We've seen so much of her, even as what would amount to a secondary role. So now, just imagine the possibilities of her being up front in the story from start to finish. The possibilities there for her character and her development, I feel like, are endless now, and that is so satisfying to see as a fan of this series for as long as I've lived, and I'm sure many other fans feel the same way.
The first features article I ever wrote for Zelda Universe focused on Zelda as the linchpin and the primary force in the franchise. The legend is Zelda's legend, despite the fact that she is not the playable character in Hyrule. The entire series starts with Zelda, it surrounds Zelda, and Zelda is the motivating force. While Link, however you name him, is an incidental part of it.
I love how her character has evolved throughout the series. So, I mean, in the original Zelda, she basically was the damsel. You rescue her at the end. And then in A Link to the Past, you rescue her at the beginning of the game. And then she, accompanies you. And then you go on to like Ocarina of Time and she becomes Sheik and helps out Link in secret. Then we have games like Spirit Tracks where she's your companion during the game. So it's almost like Zelda's done everything but be the playable character. So it's way overdue.
The credits in Skyward Sword was my first real hope that we would get Zelda as a playable character. They show cutscenes of Zelda's journey, which happens ahead of Link's journey. Link is chasing Zelda throughout the first half of Skyward Sword, and so you see these little cutscenes, and I thought, this would make an awesome game. Why don't we experience Zelda's journey as maybe a stealth mission or something like that, as she's trying to go from place to place and unlock all of these things. Now, granted, we do have to acknowledge that she has been playable a couple of times in the past. Way back when...
I feel like we've been dancing around it.
Way back when, in the mid-90s, there was a handful of games, and two of them technically starred Zelda. We become a little bit more comfortable talking about the Faces of Evil and Zelda's Adventure, the Wand of Gamelon.
So, on Zelda Universe, people who have been coming to the site for a long time may be aware that in the past we have run a feature called CDI Month. We've done that several times where we have produced basically a whole month of CDI-related content. And I do remember an article written by David Johnson, aka The Missing Link, which was called What the CDI Games Did Right. And it was about the fact that they made Zelda playable.
I've actually played them, the remade quote-unquote versions that a dedicated fan was able to make them playable.
Yep, the remasters, yeah.
The remasters, yes. And I was impressed by them. The animation stuff and whatnot are still the stuff of nightmares, but the actual gameplay was actually pretty entertaining, and it was very... It was, for what it was trying to do, it wasn't all that bad. As soon as things actually could be played in a way that made sense. Jeff, do you have any experience with CDI?
Absolutely none. Can't say I've ever touched them.
Is that intentionally or?
Combination of that and just never having the opportunity to come across them. But I'll be honest, I can't say there's been any pursuit on my part. I haven't exactly made an effort.
It's one of those games. It's one of those games where it's interesting to explore if you want to dive into that kind of history. But even as I say, it was actually decently enjoyable. I wouldn't say you're missing much unless you are a history aficionado for Zelda.
It's good for a laugh. Good, it's a good time. The other thing that's coming to my mind is actually Super Smash Brothers. So in the original Smash Brothers, Link was the only Zelda character represented, but then in Melee, Zelda became one of the playable fighters.
I've become a Zelda main in Smash Brothers.
Oh, nice.
The few times that I play it these days, I I think I looked at a tier list once, and she's fairly low on the tier list, but I'm not good enough to be tournament viable anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then Hyrule Warriors.
Yes.
Both the first, which I am still trying to 100%. It's been 8 months now that I've been trying to do this.
How many hours have you got on it?
Let's see. I would have to do some math. Basically every Monday for 4 hours at a time since the beginning of December. So we're looking at somewhere around 130 or so hours.
Yeah, because that's an undertaking.
It is an undertaking. It will happen. I am hoping to get it done before Echoes of Wisdom comes out. I don't know if it'll happen.
Well, Godspeed, my friend.
Thank you very much.
I hope you manage it.
But Zelda in that game is one of my favorite characters to play. She is so efficient and so powerful in the original Hyrule Warriors. I'm not as thrilled with her in Age of Calamity, but then we have her as a fully fleshed out character, which is so good.
See, mechanically, I love her in Age of Calamity with the Bow of Light. I think once you build up her special meter with that, she can absolutely wreck the battlefield. But also then, as a character, that is my personal favorite incarnation of Zelda. It may not be a canon entry, but that is my favorite version of Zelda's character and her personal journey. I thought it was so satisfying to see her on the front lines of the conflict from start to finish and to get into her head the whole game.
Yeah, and it really built on Breath of the Wild because I loved the Zelda from Breath of the Wild, and I was actually disappointed that the story took place in the past because I wanted to see more of her rather than just these little cutscenes and flashbacks. So yeah, I loved seeing her in Age of Calamity as well.
Well, the era of the Wild Zelda is interesting because she still kind of has that damsel archetype. However, it's more of like a martyr. Like, she willingly makes the sacrifice to go to the castle to seal Calamity Ganon and to put herself in that situation. It's all through her own will, even though she is kind of exiled to the outskirts of the plot. It's all through her own agency, which is pretty interesting. And she makes an extremely selfless sacrifice for her kingdom.
If you look at the stories of every single Zelda, and this is one of the major points I made in that article that I mentioned, is that even way back in the beginning where she is portrayed in the gameplay as a damsel in distress, if you look at the story that is provided in the booklet, she is not. That was a conscious decision that she had, and it was a specific act of defiance against an overwhelming force that she split up the Triforce, ended up being taken as basically a political prisoner by Ganon, and entrusted the tasks to Impa to find someone who could deal with this crisis. And that has been the case throughout the whole thing. Zelda has never been the stereotypical damsel in distress of, I cannot do anything for myself. She is constantly doing everything within her power to address the needs of her kingdom. And now we get to see her in a much more proactive role in that desire. So let's talk a little bit now about what that is going to entail. Copying. We're going a little Kirby, just a little bit, but instead of mimicking powers, we have full-on duplication of stuff. I love the fan art that people have been throwing in already.
Oh, it was immediate, too. Like, within an hour of the direct airing, there was already stuff popping up on social media.
It was amazing.
And
I love the fact that Zelda is going to have such a different play style to Link, because if we did give her a sword and a shield, just like Wand of Gamelon, say, it would be maybe the same as playing Link. And I know that our Numa said that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen a playable Zelda sooner. It's because they didn't want to just make her a carbon copy of Link. They did want to do something that would feel unique and different. So that's what we've ended up with, the copying. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I do wonder, though, is it going to be one of those things where, yes, there's maybe hundreds of different echoes that you can produce, but realistically you might be using like the same 4 or 5 to solve the majority of puzzles?
Well, we are creatures of habit.
Because that's how I ended up playing Tears, Tears of the Kingdom, right? As much as there was limitless things you could do with Ultra Hand and all of the different devices and things. Yeah, sure, if I was bored, I might mess around and make something fun. But if I was just trying to get through the game and solve the puzzles, I tended to find the cheesiest, quickest way to get through.
Well, I definitely think Nintendo realizes that going into developing a game like Echoes of Wisdom or the Era of the Wilds games, which entails so much experimentation. I feel like they realize a lot of players aren't going to touch half, if not a majority, of the usable items or abilities. However, then players start to learn about those as the months and years go by from seeing other people talk about them on social media or discovering them in a Let's Play on YouTube. And that keeps these games relevant then for a very long time. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, we're still making discoveries in Breath of the Wild all these years later that nobody knew about for as long as it was out. These games are so intricate and there's so many different moving parts that it's impossible to discover them all within the first couple weeks of the game being released. So that just keeps the game relevant and in the headlines for as long as possible. And I can imagine Echoes of Wisdom being in the same boat with the many different Echoes combinations.
As someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons a lot, the tagline, the attractiveness of tabletop role-playing games is the fact that you are not bound by specific rules or guidelines to solve a conundrum. With a lot of early video games and most of the Zelda franchise, there is a specific way to solve puzzles. You step on a switch, you light a torch, you kill the enemies. You only have a certain number of things and a specific strategy to do that, while in a open world type of setup, you can do as much as either the system or your imagination allows. The thing is that our minds are not programmed in a way that, oh yes, I can do everything, therefore I will do everything. But what it does mean is that I am going to look at this problem in a different way than Shona or Jeff is going to look at that problem. And so while in some circumstances we'll be like, yes, we're going to use the rock to bash the moblin over the head, maybe in another circumstance I'm going to use the table, and Jeff is going to use the column of water, and Shona's going to use whatever other echoes we end up with. And that's the universal application that comes with these games. It's not that I am going to use everything because everything is there. It's I get to play this game the way that I would play this game, and everyone else gets to play this game however they want to play it.
That's true. And it's a lot of fun talking to other people about how they did solve the different puzzles, or just, if you're watching someone streaming the game and doing something that you might not have ever thought of. It's really fun. It's really cool.
Well, that's where you get like the 900 Korok seeds, because they drop such a huge number in the overworld, so that no matter which direction you take through the overworld while playing through the game, you can find the appropriate amount to expand your inventory and your weapon slots. I don't think Nintendo necessarily expected people to hunt down every single Korok seed. I think they just put that in there primarily so that there's a guarantee that there's enough that you're going to find no matter which direction you take through the overworld.
Jeff.
And maybe that'll be the same with the echoes.
Jeff, they know completionists exist.
I know
they know that there are some people, I'm pointing at myself,
what I'm saying,
who must collect and do all of the things at least once. That's why they gave us a trophy of poop.
I think the most I've ever gotten in one playthrough is like 350, and that felt like a million to me. Like, there's no way I could ever do that.
Yeah, I just got enough so that I could max out all my slots. And I'm like, yep, that's fine. If I find any more along the way, great.
I'm good.
But yeah.
I've done it once, and unless my streamers somehow incentivize me to do it again, I am never doing it again.
Wonder if we'll have something similar in Echoes of Wisdom.
The size of the game, and as far as we can tell, it looks like
100 golden Skulltulas felt like a lot.
Yes.
It looks like an expanded Link to the Past map, or something close to it. And so, the overall size, if we're going to take that as a base, we're looking at Link to the Past, Light World, Dark World type of setup in terms of size. We don't know what our pits of darkness are involving here.
No.
But at least with that size, it kind of gives you an idea. So look maybe to the Maiamais of Link Between Worlds as a general idea of how much collecting you may end up with.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the world will be a bit larger than A Link to the Past, though. I mean, we've seen, I know generally, yeah, the map, we've seen a lot of comparisons, but then in the trailer, you know, we've seen places like Gerudo Town and things like that. So I'm hoping that generally the areas might be bigger than they were back then.
We had Gerudo, we had both species of Zora.
Yes, that's I know it's been done before, but I thought that little scene was really funny. Looked like they were fighting about
Deku
something.
Scrub, I believe.
Deku Scrubs, we saw those. I would be surprised if we didn't see any Gorons. If they're going to throw all of those, they better bring the Gorons in. Be a little empty without them.
I want to see the Magma again. I know we probably never will, but
I like the Magmas. I always give them a gangster New York accent whenever I play Skyward Sword. It's great.
I don't know. I'm probably a little bit more. I like the more traditional races. So some of these ones that have just been like, here's a random one chucked into a game for a one-off appearance. I didn't really get that attached to. It feels like almost it might be combining elements of different eras of Zelda. So obviously we've got the wild, a lot of, you know, inspiration there from what seems more like, you know, open-ended gameplay and hopefully a larger world. But then, yeah, seeing things like Deku Scrubs and different types of Zoras appear, I think I'm actually really excited to explore this version of Hyrule. And it seems more like as opposed to Hyrule in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which was, you know, post-apocalyptic and rebuilding, this is more of just, hey, here's everyday functioning Hyrule until these pits of darkness appear. But otherwise, I'm really excited to see what this version's about.
Let's do some brainstorming then. We have at the very beginning, Link is doing his thing. It's going awesome. And he defeats Ganon, but it looks like the spear, his trident, is the thing that either somehow breaks a hole in reality.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so the trident, yeah.
Yeah, so then that starts to shatter and spread out, and then Link obviously sinks into it. So, what is then the cause? Is that Ganon's essence that has created darkness? Did it break the space-time continuum and we've ended up with another alternate world type of situation, which is not unusual?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that because we've seen time and time again where Ganon can mess with Hyrule even from beyond the grave. I mean, whether it's Adventure of Link, where it's basically him controlling Dark Link, Lord knows how many other games where even if he's been sealed away, or A Link Between Worlds where Yuga manages to summon him from the Dark World. Ganon always has a way to mess with Hyrule even if he's not alive and physically in person.
Yeah. In my head I was picturing this as a bit of like an alternate dimension or something, because in the trailer we can see clips of Zelda seemingly in these areas, and it's like, oh well, here's random bits of the landscape that have been sucked down there as well. So it's going to be interesting.
Oh, really? I missed that. Okay.
She's in areas and there's the sort of purple background, but then here's some trees and things.
I only remember the parts of the world that have gotten sucked in. I mean, the world, and then there are holes in the world to be. Yeah. I'm using all kinds of hand motions that nobody can see but Shona and Jeff. So
I will say I did spend time watching that trailer dissecting it, sort of slowed down, and I jumped on YouTube and watched a few people who had analyzed it, because as a busy mum, I don't have time to sit down and like go through and make a whole analysis myself these days. But certainly, yeah, just interesting to see if you pause it and sort of go like look at each scene, what you can find.
10 things you missed in the Echoes of Wisdom trailer.
I'm very interested to see how insurmountable those rifts in the overworld are, because obviously coming off of the Era of the Wilds games, which were completely open, you can come from literally any angle you want. Maybe this overworld's going to be a little bit more segmented, where we can't necessarily go anywhere we want from the start anytime. That we're going to be kind of funneled into certain locations based on hazards and other obstacles that we can't necessarily get past, depending on what point of the story we're in and how much we've progressed.
In order to do that, they would need to have specific echoes necessary for you to overcome specific obstacles, which is not unusual. It's something that has been done in Zelda before. I'm thinking specifically Link's Awakening, Oracle of Ages and Seasons. And if they want to take a more linear progression through the game, I am perfectly fine with that. After everything that happened with Tears of the Kingdom, I am ready for a little bit more of a linear storytelling experience.
I never want to see Memories ever again. I never want another plot that half of it takes place in the past.
This could honestly be a whole separate episode of this podcast to discussing the storytelling mechanic. I could rant about it for quite a while, to be honest. So yeah, I'd definitely be
right there with you.
Yeah,
as would
definitely for Echoes. I am hoping for something real time, something more cohesive. And look, as much as I do love open world gameplay, I love freedom, but I don't need it to be boundless freedom. And I don't mind if I've got a huge world to explore, but there are a few areas that are off limits early on. That gives me something to look forward to and to work towards. And it could just be that, maybe this area is full of like really hard enemies, right? And you're just going to get your butt kicked. I can't wait to come back there later when I'm like strong and leveled up and just, whoop some butts. That for me is really, really satisfying. Even if it is something like you do have to find a specific item to progress, it doesn't have to be as linear as traditional Zelda games or past Zelda games, but I don't mind a mix of both, and especially if it leads to a more cohesive story. We know that Nintendo, when it comes to Zelda games, they tend to put the mechanic first and the story second, but I do love story, I do love lore, so every single game I'm always crying out for more.
There is satisfaction that comes with progression, and progression can come in our gaming ability to more efficiently tackle whatever obstacles are in front of us, but there's also progression in the story. We like to see our characters evolve as characters, and so that's where the appeal for a linear story progression comes from, because you want to see things more or less in order so that you can track and see how your characters are developing.
Yep, I think that's true.
I think people also like seeing the ups and downs of the more linear story. Like, you in Ocarina of Time, you acquire the first 3 spiritual stones, and then there's that big moment where Ganondorf breaks into the sacred realm, or the halfway point of Twilight Princess where Zan nearly kills Midna. Everybody likes that real big, oh no moment where the stakes are completely changed, everything kind of goes to hell for a minute, and our quest just gets that much more serious.
Good times.
Yeah, that's so true, and it is something I did miss in the Wild games. I mean, look, Breath of the Wild, to be fair, it was more about uncovering the story and uncovering what happened. And look, I know they did that again in Tears of the Kingdom, but I don't know. I went into that game with very different expectations as well. So
Breath of the Wild did it better. I'm going to make that proclamation, because the essence of that gameplay was that of self-discovery. You were discovering who Link was discovering what was going on, and Zelda was discovering herself and who she was. And so all of those things kind of came together, where the memories that you discovered there gave context to what was going on, and the fact that you could get them in different orders did not hinder that feeling of discovery, because the story had already been accomplished. While in Tears of the Kingdom, there are specific story beats that are supposed to happen, and you hit those beats in the wrong order, and then suddenly that progression and that part of the story is ruptured.
So do you think that in Echoes we're seeing a brand new Link and a brand new Zelda?
Ooh, good question.
I think so, because the setup for the game is a unique one. Although it uses the same general style of Ganon that we have seen in Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds, and the world itself looks Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds-ish, the setup, the beginning, is different. We haven't had Zelda in a crystal in this format before. And everything else that's touched in there, Link's cloak and whatnot, it appears different to me.
I think so as well, because I feel like Nintendo kind of wanted the Era of the Wilds games to be like a soft reboot for the series. And now, especially with the Switch being as successful as it was, especially in comparison to previous Nintendo consoles, there's a whole wave of new fans who have been experiencing Zelda for the first time this generation. You know, for a lot of fans, Echoes of Wisdom may only be their third or fourth Zelda game. So I think Nintendo is going to try and rein in the heavy connections to past games in order to make it as accessible as possible.
That's it. We're finally chucking the timeline out the window.
Good. No, we need...
I know, right? Thank you!
Yeah.
I have no need for the timeline. I don't believe it in it anymore.
No, again, could be a whole separate podcast episode. We've certainly done
we really could.
Some panels at conventions as well, actually, about the timeline. But yeah, like, it's interesting because the setup for Echoes of Wisdom, we see Link fighting Ganon, and so of course that's what Link does, right? He's the hero and he defeats Ganon, and he does that and rescues Zelda. And so I wonder, is Nintendo just assuming, everyone knows what a Zelda game is, so we know Link's the hero, we know Zelda's the princess, but now we're going to upend it by having Link, imprisoned or wherever he's gone into the pit, and Zelda is the one who has to go and find him and figure out what's going on. I do imagine it will be, for me, I think, a new version of them as well. But it is, again, like, well, what are the stakes? Is Link just going to be a one-dimensional, he's the hero, and that's it? Or, will there be much character development? I'm not sure. I hope so. But it'll just be interesting to see how that setup plays into the story.
I think it plays then into the fact that the studio who developed this game is the same one that did the Link's Awakening remake. I was expecting that they would go on to remake Ages and Seasons, and I don't know why a new game didn't even cross my mind, but there you go. But if you look at Link's Awakening as a jump-off point, that is a story that is told with a very interesting dynamic where if you are not paying attention, the majority of the story flows right over your head until right before Dungeon 6. But if you are paying attention, hints that Colin Island is not all that it appears to be is everywhere. If you look at that and use that for going into this game, since we don't see Link, at least it doesn't seem like we're going to be seeing Link all that much, it could be very easily dismissing him as the reverse damsel in distress, whatever terminology there is for that, the male damsel, what. But there's also questions revolving, what is this stuff? What is this companion that we have come up with? We almost, especially after Navi, from then on, it was almost never just oh, I am here to tell you how to do stuff kind of character. They had direct connections to whatever it was that was going on. Personally, I see this little Tri thing, and I think Triforce of Wisdom.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah, the name Tri, the fact that the game is Echoes of Wisdom, right? So if Tri is the one who is teaching Zelda how to make the echoes. And also the fact that if you look closely, you'll notice that Tri has a little like tail, or there's little triangles following them, and that making the different echoes costs different number of these little pieces, right? And I imagine as you progress, you'll get more, so you can do more complex echoes or do more at a time. But there's a lot of alluding to the Triforce here, so I definitely think that might be a big part of the story. And we've had an embodiment of the Master Sword, right? We've had Fi or Phi, the spirit of the Master Sword, accompanying Link. So why not the spirit of the Triforce of Wisdom?
That would be really neat because, since Skyward Sword, the lore of the games has kind of moved away from the three goddesses to focus more on Hylia, this singular entity. So that I would love that if maybe Echoes of Wisdom, kind of alluded to Nehru and Din and Ferrari again.
There's precedent for it too. At the end of Link to the Past, the Triforce, the essence of the Triforce, speaks to Link.
Yeah.
And so there is
Right.
in essence, a personality at the very least that is attached to this relic. And in Ages and Seasons, the Triforce is what sends Link on his journey to those. So there is a will that is present within the Triforce that can do those kinds of things.
Right.
And of
Doesn't it
course now,
transport him to
Yes.
Holodrum and Labrina?
Yes. Yeah. And now I'm also thinking back to the 1989 Zelda animated series, which had the Triforces speaking, but also had a Princess Zelda who was very capable, and when she was often the one who helped get them out of trouble. Link, in fact, he tended
It
to be
made
a bit
Link
more of a
one
buffoon.
heck of a ditz.
Yeah.
I try and forget that thing exists, to be honest.
That's how the brief run from Valiant Comics is too. Link is
Yes.
just this real meathead hero, whereas Zelda is the sensible, smart one of the two.
Yep, I think those comics were sort of following on or very much inspired by that animated series, even just looking at the art style and all of that.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely, I'd say worth checking out if you're a fan of the classic era. A bit nostalgic. But again, it just shows that it is well and truly time for us to have playable Zelda.
This is, if you're talking about just the Switch generation, if you're even taking out Super Smash Brothers, we've had 3 games where you can play as Zelda: Cadence of Hyrule, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, and then Age of Calamity. Yeah, I think people have definitely gotten a taste of being able to control Zelda and use her as the protagonist. So it definitely feels like it's time.
Yeah, Nintendo have done the same with Mario. So we've had some Princess Peach games, and just recently Princess Peach Showtime. So I think if we hadn't had Echoes of Wisdom dropped on us, I think there'd be over time just more and more demand for playable Zelda.
Question for you too. When did you first get the inkling that Zelda was going to be playable based on that trailer? What moment in that trailer did the light bulb go off in your guys' head?
As soon as I saw her running down the steps, running away from all the darkness that was coming in, it started to go in my mind. It's like, wait. And then finally, when it shows her walking and you see the expanse, I still have the recording. I think I made a short of it. It's on my YouTube. When it's just like, it's Zelda! It's so great.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I didn't watch it live. The direct happened at midnight my time.
Okay, that's
and
true. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting anything major from it. So I made the choice to prioritize sleep, which with young children
That's smart.
is
That's
precious.
fair.
Sleep is important,
so
everybody.
the problem was when I woke up, I turned on my phone and first thing I see are notifications, new Zelda game announced, Playable Zelda, and it unfortunately, so I had that part of it spoiled for me, just in like a few headlines and like one picture of the game. So, but certainly went and first thing turned on the TV and watched the trailer and then watched the whole direct. So I was a little bit sad to have not had that surprise in real time, but it's still cool.
Time zones are the worst. I will get that with some of the games that I play when they have trailers that start at 5 in the morning. If you're not either sacrificing sleep or remember that something happened as soon as you wake up, you're gonna get spoiled on something.
Yeah, and like to be fair, I'm not like super precious over spoilers. Like obviously I don't want the main story and the main twists and that, but I don't care. I've seen another little detail about this game which has come up I think in a rating, one of the classifications for
The
it.
RSB rating.
Yeah, one of those, and someone was like, "Oh, that's a spoiler. Why didn't you this was posted by ZU's socials, like why didn't you put a spoiler warning?" And it's like, well, it's look, what everyone thinks is a spoiler is different, right? So I'm not one who's going to hide from every little detail because that just doesn't worry me.
There's only but so far you can go unless you want to get yourself completely off social media. That's the best way to do it.
And if you want to run a Zelda fan site, which I've been doing for like 23 years, I remember having the biggest reveal of the Wind Waker spoiled because that game came out 6 months later in Australia, and I run a Zelda website.
Those were the days.
Yeah, right. So I'm glad we don't live in those days anymore.
My experience similar to that was when Twilight Princess debuted. I was on a class trip with my eighth grade class to Washington D.C. This was back in 2004, so this was long before anybody had cell phones or tablets, long before Facebook or anything like that. This was only back when forums was your social media. So that whole week when I was on that class trip, I had no idea that Twilight Princess had been revealed at E3. So I come home, I go on ZU my first day back, and the website is just exploding with excitement.
Those were the days. We're old.
Little 13-year-old me.
Gosh. I'll be 37 next month.
But that is the flip side, right? Like I got spoiled because I had a phone and social media, and so as soon as I turned it on in the morning, it's like, bing, you like Zelda, well here's some Zelda news for you, before I had the chance to seek it out myself.
That's how it's gotta go. This is the world we live in. So who do you think is doing all of this? Who's our big bad? Are we fighting Ganon more? Is that
I hope not.
The obvious answer?
I think the series is in desperate need of some new villains, especially
good villains,
especially like humanoid villains, not like like an inhuman entity like Calamity Ganon was, which is like this just like
I like
force,
the demon
like
train.
this faceless force,
big old face on a locomotive.
Or like Bellum, right? Like who really remembers Bellum? Such a memorable villain. And even ones who showed some potential, like Zant, just ended up being, Ganon puppet and just sort of lost it at the end. But I do agree. Look, I feel like though for Echoes of Wisdom, it might be more about figuring out what's happened and undoing it. So I don't know if it will be tied. I'm imagining at the moment it might be tied into Ganon, and maybe at the very end Zelda finds Link, and the only way to like break Link out or to free him is to fight whatever remains of Ganon, his spirit, I don't know, like some whatever this world is, like some Dark World version of Ganon to get Link out. And I actually think it'd be really fun if they could like fight side by side. But with obviously Zelda, you're controlling her and Link is the support, which is something we've seen reversed in other games like Wind Waker. I think that would be good fun.
Give me another Spirit Tracks climactic moment and I will be exceptionally happy. Because that was so good. If our prediction regarding Tri is correct, and Tri is the essence of the Spirit of Wisdom, Zelda really likes to work with parallels in their heroes and villains. What about the essence of the Triforce of Power? Somehow corrupted in some way because of what Ganon has been doing. Because while the Triforce itself is a neutral entity, what they end up doing is dependent on who's wielding them.
That would be a very interesting twist for the series lore. Turning the sacred, divine item, weapon, whatever you would describe it as, that has been the saving grace in so many games, turning that into essentially the villain.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really interesting. But then I would say, well, if we are going to have the essence or the embodiment of wisdom and power, then what's going to happen with courage?
Right.
Well, there is that ERSB rating thing that you mentioned that someone complained was a spoiler. I think the spoiler thing that they were talking about was the fact that in that description, because they have to write out the things that are in the game that determine what their rating is, Link is playable for some period of time. He's obviously not the focal point. Zelda is the focal point, but there are going to be sections where he is there and you use him for something or another. Maybe in the prelude before we control Zelda, or maybe in the final boss.
I'm really hoping that opening scene that we saw, we actually get to play through. I think that'd be way more fun than just watching it. And that way you start off the game by like in a Ganon fight, right?
That would be unique
at the very end. But I don't want it to happen at the end, because I don't want to take the attention away from Zelda. So I don't want it to be a case where, Link is free now, great, we switch back to controlling him, because that would just totally undermine Zelda.
Oh, I hope that is not the case at all.
It depends on how it is implemented. So I will refer back to Spirit Tracks, which has one of the best final bosses ever, because you had both of them there working in tandem, and you do control Zelda as part of that, because the whole deal for that game is team up, even though she's not the main character. There could be a situation like that in a final boss where they're working together to defeat the final boss, and because of that, you are moving Link around and getting a chance to maybe switch between them. Zelda is producing things and throwing all this stuff and providing an opportunity for Link to rush in and do the stabby thing.
Yeah, and look, I don't mind potentially controlling both, but again, I really want Zelda to be the primary. So if it's, okay, fine, we'll put Link in position or whatever, but I just really want it to be, satisfying. Like you feel like Zelda is the one who has orchestrated it.
I also hope that Zelda is not a silent protagonist, like how Link has always been. I really hope she speaks throughout the entire game, like, in so many other titles outside of Zelda. I mean, so many other properties.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of over the whole silent protagonist archetype.
I've been over it for a long time myself. And again, you think about what this story might look like. So Hyrule has just had like all these like rifts or pits or whatever have appeared. People have been swallowed up. Like the citizens are going to be distressed and wondering like what is going on. So here's the princess, so like one of the leaders of the kingdom, going around, visiting the towns. Of course she's going to be there to like reassure people, to tell them, hey, like I'm here to help. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. This is what I'm doing. She has to speak to them. It would just be awkward and weird. And I think it has gotten to the point where Silent Link has become awkward and weird. Some of the cutscenes in the games, it's like, Link, it's awkward. You just need to say something. We know you speak. You're not mute. We know you can physically speak. But yes, please give Zelda a voice. Let her speak.
So
I
guess I'm the odd one out here because I am fine with Mute Link. Maybe it's just because I've grown up with him. Maybe because I am used to being Link's voice in however I am playing the game. So it's nice to not have somebody else's personality implemented in the game that I have self-inserted myself. I'm not one for self-insertion all that much, but Link is like my primary exception. Zelda, on the other hand, has a very long history of having a voice in some form or another. And literally every single game that she is in, she has said something. And so it fits with precedent to keep giving her a voice. There are definitely ways that they could do it where she doesn't, but I am certainly with you that it would be much more fitting if she did, because she's always had it.
I think it's because Shona and I were both avid fan fiction writers for Zelda in our younger days that we really want to see Link talk, and we don't like the whole silent protagonist thing anymore.
That's so true. But again, like growing up with the series, Connor, you mentioned a while ago like the little instruction booklets, and I read all those stories, and I never once really saw Link as a blank slate, right? He was his own character, you know, he was an adventurer, a swordsman, and whatever. And he burning with justice, he swore to find the Triforce and save Zelda, right? And so in my head, he already has a personality, and he speaks, because how could he swear to do these things? And no, we know the games definitely imply that he talks. He's not mute. He does talk in certain scenarios. So over time, Link has always been a character. And again, I feel like, yes, he's become more blank as time has gone on. But even Ocarina of Time era, when we started to get, more expanded stories within the game, just because the game technology was improving, and Link was so much of a character to me. Definitely not a self-insert. I mean, I'm like, yeah, Link is cool. Like, I'd love to be Link. Put me in the Zelda world, I'll be Link, thanks. But yeah, so he's always spoken in my imagination.
And then you get games like Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, where even though Link doesn't talk, he has so many different facial expressions.
He's very expressive, yes.
Reaction, yes. It's a lot of physical expression as opposed to vocal.
But I felt like even by Skyward Sword, that's where I feel like it started to get awkward. It was like he just made because Wind Waker was cute because the cell shading technology was newer then, and that's what allowed for the expressiveness. And I think it worked really well. But by the time we get to Skyward Sword, and I think where voice acting and things like that has become much more the norm, just seeing Link making so many, sometimes it was just like derp and like he just almost looked a bit, I don't know, like
it sounds like Groose.
Yeah. Well, Groose had more personality than Link.
Ouch!
Awesome.
I will challenge that.
I think she's right, man. The Groose was loose. Like that is what it is.
And that was a great character development.
We all love Groose. I don't have technically anything against Groose by the end. I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm saying that I don't think Link was as bland as you think Link was in that game. But that is me. Skyward Sword is also my all-time favorite, so.
Fair enough.
Any final thoughts or predictions that you want to throw out?
My one prediction, and I literally just came up with this off the top of my head, I think there's going to be a lot of NPCs or inhabitants of Hyrule that kind of resent Zelda when you first see them. Like Shona was mentioning earlier, how Zelda is in one of the key leaders of the kingdom, and she's going to be going into the middle of it to try and save it. I think there's going to be a lot of people who either blame her or wonder why things have gone wrong with her in charge. And I think that's going to be part of her character development.
Interesting that you bring that up, because someone pointed out to me one of the early scenes where Tri is teaching Zelda how to use the echoes. She's in jail.
That's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
She is in jail, and additionally, she is keeping her identity a secret as she is leaving the castle. So how many people are going to recognize her as the princess? And how much of the stuff that she is hearing, is that going to be oh my gosh, this is what people think about me right now?
That's so interesting. I'd actually almost forgotten about her being in jail. And when I saw that, I think I just jumped straight to assuming that she's been captured by, the evil minions. Like, we've seen Link, Wind Waker, he ends up in jail. If you get caught, like he ends up in jail in a few games. And then Zelda's, imprisoned at the start of A Link to the Past. And so in my head, I just jumped to those and just assumed it must be like the evil minions who have like imprisoned her. And then Tri comes along and teaches her the echoes, and she busts herself out and goes on her way. But that would be really, really interesting if there are citizens of Hyrule who are, like, hey, Zelda, like, you screwed up, like, you're a bad leader, resenting or angry. That would be really interesting. And it makes me think of Breath of the Wild, like, when Link especially goes to the Zoras, right? And they're all like, Link, like, you're basically the reason, like, Midna died. We don't like you because, they're so long-lived and have long memories, right? Mifa, sorry. This is me clearly needing my next cup of coffee this morning. But yeah, that would be really interesting.
And that's something that I feel like would be very unique to Zelda, because even though you kind of got a glimpse of that with the Zora in Breath of the Wild, for the most part, Link is just a unassuming civilian of Hyrule, whereas Zelda in just about every game is, the monarch of the kingdom. She's got that responsibility. She's got that fame and that recognition that Link traditionally doesn't have, at least at the start of the games. He's often just this, unassuming kid from, the outskirts of the kingdom who rises up to become a hero. But from the start, Zelda's going to be the princess of this kingdom, and she's going to be the figurehead of everything.
There was a plot point of that in Breath of the Wild where the king is trying to get Zelda to stop doing the scholarly research stuff. She's like, do you understand what the people are saying out there about you right now?
Nah, I think Rome was BSing her. I think he was just being a jerk.
I wouldn't be entirely... Well, it depends. We've seen in the world that you get stuff like that all the time. All the people saying that all the people suck. I would not be surprised if he was cherry-picking some of those to try and get her to focus.
If Hyrule had social media, right?
If Hyrule had social media. I think we've done that a couple of times on Twitter, haven't we?
Well, hey, there's
comment like
Gazette.
You're in Hyrule.
There's the Lucky Gazette.
There's the Lucky Gazette. Letters to the editor.
Of Hyrule. The National Enquirer of Hyrule.
Not the National Enquirer. Come on, she has more journalistic integrity than that.
Which did evolve from like the rumor mill.
It did evolve from the rumor mill, yes.
Yeah.
So that was the National Enquirer. Then they're like, you know what? There's a whole lot going on. Let's verify some stuff. And thus the Lucky Gazette was born. Good job. Way to report your facts. And thanks to the both of you for joining us for
thank you. Thanks for having us. It's been fun. I've been looking forward to discussing this. And I'm
happy to
really
be here.
looking forward to playing it too.
Likewise, only another couple months.
Couple months away.
It's going to come up so quickly.
It's going to be so great. We're going to play it. We're going to love it. We're going to dissect it. We're going to be talking about it. And I hope that all of you listening enjoyed this time here. And will get the chance to play it yourselves as soon as it comes out in September. Shona, Jeff, thanks again for being here and discussing things with us. Thanks to all of you listening for this new edition of the Zelda Universe podcast. We hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you all next time.